Hello. My name is Clemmons, and I'm the Scottish Church's Parliamentary Officer. The Parliamentary Office is an ecumenical project of the Church and Society Council. Today, I'm going to talk about doing politics differently. This is one of 7 areas of work that are part of the Church and Society Council's Speak Out, Tackling Injustice, Living Hope. Political systems in Scotland, the UK, Europe and around the world are in a period of significant change. Since 2014, Scotland has voted to remain in the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom has voted to leave the European Union. Both outcomes creating passionate responses among people who support or oppose the decision taken. Our existing political systems are struggling to cope. We've seen most of our major parties have changes of leadership, and we've seen divisive splits appearing within those parties. We've also seen the tone of public debate change, with increasingly hostile and emotive language. During a recent debate in the House of Commons, MP after MP stood up and described the threats and abuse that they had received during the recent general election. In some cases, that abuse was directed at their families, including young children. The examples given were of personal attacks, not robust disagreement over policy, as you might have seen in previous years. Trust in politicians is low. People have ceased to respect the political process. And there's a big challenge here for a system of representative democracy. A system in which we vote for someone to represent us every 4 or 5 years, and then we leave them to get on with that job. There's a need to respond to these changes by doing politics differently. Responses to the Church and Society Council consultation, Speak Out, 10,000 Voices for Change, in 2015, showed a clear aspiration for the Church to address these issues. Specific responses included issues around a hope for a more direct and more local democracy, people's disillusionment with the political system, and a desire to move beyond party politics and tribalism. There should be trust between people and the politicians that represent them. Trust is about relationships between people who are flawed and imperfect, people who are doing their best, and people who don't always agree with each other, but still need to reach a shared vision for the communities that they live in. At the same time as this loss of trust, there's a real desire around Scotland for more decisions to be made locally, and local decision-making to be more inclusive and more transparent. We've seen a surge of interest in people wanting to get involved in decision-making processes, sometimes talked about as participative democracy. This development has been championed by the Scottish Government through community empowerment legislation, as well as by civil society, including the Church. A move towards local decision-making is particularly important for communities who already feel far from decision-makers. This is often the case in communities who are experiencing poverty. Here is a meaningful way of responding to some of the issues that we face, a way of bringing people back into the political process. The Church has an important role to play in doing politics differently, both for ourselves and in encouraging and supporting others. We're called to give a voice to people who sometimes find it hard to be heard. In Mark's Gospel, when Jesus encounters blind Bartimaeus, he does not presume that he knows what Bartimaeus wants, however obvious it may appear. Instead, he asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus is interested in hearing Bartimaeus' voice, just as he wants to hear the voices of everybody in our society. If we place people and their needs at the heart of our political system, then we can start to transform the way in which that system functions. The Church is an important part of Scottish public life. We have the capacity to speak and to be heard by a very wide audience. We can create space in which the voices of people who have experienced poverty, prejudice or injustice can be included in public conversation. We have resources of time, energy, creativity, as well as money, that we can lend to our work. And what we do as a national institution, as local congregations, can have a real impact on our communities. I found that when I ask people what they think about politics or the political system, they give me a negative answer. The system is perceived as corrupt and as distant from the communities it is supposed to represent. But if I ask that same person about their own representatives, their local councillor, MP or MSP, I often get a different answer. For most people who've worked with their own representatives, they can usually relate to them as a person and as a valuable part of their community. There's a difference between how people perceive politicians and how people perceive the political system that those same people are a part of. And the factor that makes a difference is having a relationship with the person. What people think about politics matters. It determines whether people participate in the system, and the level of participation, in turn, determines how successful the system is. The Church and Society Council is committed to doing politics differently. In 2016 and 17, we had elections to the Scottish Parliament, a referendum on leaving the European Union, local elections, and a snap general election, and that's a lot of elections. In fact, it's twice as many elections as you would normally see in that period of time. And elections are inherently adversarial. There are winners and there are losers. And there's a great number of people who commit their energy and their passion to the campaign. So we decided to ask, how can we think about elections in a different way? The idea we came up with was to invite candidates to a pre-election event and for them to have a public conversation with a series of people, each talking about their own experiences and having their questions answered. The reason that this is doing politics differently is that we placed the people from our communities and the people that hope to represent them at the heart of the event. We did not provide space for representatives to focus on prepared statements of party policy, and we did not allow people to debate with each other. The event began by giving people with lived experience of some of Scotland's hardships to tell their stories. We invited our political representatives to listen first, and then to speak, and to tell us how their party would respond to what they'd heard. This model moves control over the agenda away from the political party and towards the community and the person with the story to tell. We held events of this kind, calling them People's Politics, ahead of the Scottish Parliament elections in 2016, and we piloted the model for the local government elections in May of this year. The politicians who were involved told us they found it challenging and different from the normal pre-election meeting, but they found it a good experience, and we hope that those who told their stories found it the same. This is an example of how a new and innovative model that demonstrates that we can create space for different kinds of conversation, even during the heat of all of those elections. But what happens next? In that supposed period of quiet, when the government can get on with the business of governing, we followed that theme of trust. We set about helping congregations to build relationships with the MSPs that represent them. The Meet Your MSP project was launched soon after the Scottish elections in 2016. It aimed to encourage and support congregations to invite their MSPs to meet with them. The idea of invitation is important here. This is about offering hospitality as well as sharing the work of the church. It's a way for churches to take the initiative to get to know their representatives and to start to build the relationships that are an essential part of a healthy and successful political system. Doing politics differently also requires a change to systems as well as relationships. The Church and Society Council is part of a Scotland-wide network enabling some financial decisions to be taken locally through participatory budgeting. The idea is that when an organisation needs to make a decision about financial spending or an aspect of service delivery, they place the decision in the hands of the community that it affects. For example, a local authority may have funding available for neighbourhood improvements and decide to use participatory budgeting, or PB for short, to allocate the funds. Community groups that operate in that area are invited to come up with ideas for how that money could be spent. The ideas are shared, perhaps at an event. Members of the community vote on who should receive the funding. What makes this different is that the community makes the decision. This is not a consultation where people are asked for their opinion and then the decision is made elsewhere. The power to decide is transferred to the community. This idea is fundamental to how we make financial decisions. And it's not new. PB was first used in Porto Alegre in Brazil in 1989 to distribute scarce public money in a transparent and democratic way. And it's been used around the world with great success since then. PB is creative and it's fun. It allows people to interact with their neighbours and their communities. It enables them to feel empowered. And it also enables community groups to support each other practically as well as financially. Communities can learn new skills in fundraising, financial decision-making, and in budgeting. PB is particularly important to enable people who are marginalised to participate as equals in an open and accountable process. In 2016 and 17, the Church and Society Council received funding from the Scottish Government to provide a pot of money to 4 congregations to host a PB process in their community. Training and support for each congregation was also provided. A minister from one of those congregations explained that the PB process was a challenge to the way that we are church in the community. He described the process as transformative, and he would do it again. This too is doing politics differently. It is exploring new ways of making local decisions. Participative processes such as PB have the potential to change the nature of our political dialogue. They can allow us to change emphasis from political parties and have a greater emphasis on enabling shared decision-making. In each of these areas of work, the Church and Society Council hopes to play our part in creating trust between politicians and those they serve, and in modelling different ways of making decisions in our communities. Let me finish by making an offer. If you like the ideas you've heard, come and work with us. If you'd like to try one of the ideas I've been talking about, we'd love to do it with you. Or if you'd like to try something else and you'd like us to join you, we'd love that too. We want to do politics differently ourselves by offering hospitality, by being creative, by empowering communities. And we want to encourage those that we work with to do that too. Thank you.